Hello again, I'm Larry Hamilton, and this is going to be my first watercolor demonstration. We're going to try to do a watercolor painting that's a copy of an old California mission. You can see the original photo here of what it looked like, and we're going to do it in watercolor, as I said, and try to see if we can clean it up and make it look like a more modern new facility, maybe as it looked when it was originally there before it started getting so dilapidated. As I said, we're doing watercolor. I have my palette, my board set up here with a half sheet of watercolor paper. Standard watercolor paper is 22 by 30. I have a 15 by 22 sheet of paper here, but the aspect ratio of this painting is requires about a 12 by 16 finished painting, so I have used masking tape and taped off a 16 by 12 size, and I have completed the sketch. I'll zoom in here. As you can see, the sketch is completed, and won't have to take time to do that. And we will begin by explaining the kind of brushes I'm using, the paints I'm using, and we will go from there and see how this works. There we go. Okay, now I have my palette. Camera rolling, and we'll be able to look at the brushes. I'm going to zoom back here to get just about the right distance on this painting so you can see as much as possible without being too small. And I'd like to explain the brushes we're using. We're using a set of Sterling Edwards brushes, and I'm using two large brushes here, a medium and small. It's 1.5 inch and a 1 inch brush. I'm using 3 flats. I have a 1 inch flat, a 1/2 inch flat, a 1/4 inch flat. I have 4 round brushes. One is a number 12 round, a number 8 round, number 4 round, and then I have a number 6 rigger. So those are the primary brushes we'll be using in this painting. And I will remove those, and we will show you what colors we're using from the palette. The palette consists of, as you can see here, a number of very bright colors that are made by My Mary Blue. And I'll just go around here very quickly and tell you what they are. We have neutral tint, is sort of like a Payne's gray. I have a cyan blue, which is a blue with a bit of green in it. I have ultramarine blue, which is blue with purple in it. I have an ultraviolet color, which is very beautiful purple. I have a crimson lake, similar to alizarin crimson. I have a garnet lake, which is another dark purple with a little more brown in it. I have a cadmium red here. I had burnt sienna. I have raw sienna, yellow ochre. I have a cupric green, which is a very heavy staining color, very much like viridian green. I have another earth color here that's called golden lake, which is very similar to raw sienna, but it has a little bit different, darker texture, darker color rather. And I have a couple of yellows. I have a lemon yellow, which is yellow with green in it. I have a yellow, cadmium yellow, which is yellow with orange in it. On the inside row, I have some browns. I have burnt umber. I have a sap green. I have a very pretty Avignon orange, which is another color by My Mary Blue that's very unique. And I may not use that too much, but it's got some very pretty colors, or it is a very pretty color, I should say. I have primary red magenta, and I have a beautiful brown called Still to Grain Brown. So that's the palette, and we're going to get started here, and I'll wipe off some of the paint off of my fingers here. As you can see, I have my palette set up here with my water containers, 2 water containers. As usual, one is for clean water and one is for dirty water. And I will be using them, trying to keep the clean water as clean as possible, because I'll use it for washes that I put on before I put paint on. And you might be able to see here I have a set of paper towel here that's wrapped around a sponge, and that's really to get some of the water out of the brush. So I don't end up with too much water in my brush. And I'll use that to dab on so that I don't pollute my paints as I mix from color to color. And so let's get started. The paper I'm using is Arches 140-pound cold press, and it has a slight texture to it, so we get some interesting effects with that color. So to start out with, I'm just going to wet some of this up the top, and we will get this thing going. So I'm going to wet the sky area all the way down to the top of this roof here of this little gazebo-like building that's over an old well. Pull this over to the building here, wet that. Come down to the top of this building, which is the house that's left over from the old mission. And there's a lot of trees in the background. Also, I'm painting this vertically, which is going to be somewhat challenging. Most watercolor painters paint horizontally so they don't have water running and have problems with runs. So I may have a few running problems here, I don't know, but we'll take them as they come, and if it causes a problem, I'll maybe be able to show you how you kind of get out of a problem with runs and that sort of thing. So what I've really gotten here now is just the paper nice and wet on top, and we're going to put in a very light blue sky. So I'm going to start with my ultra blue and make a puddle here, as you can see from the palette camera, that I'm getting a very light blue color. I'm going to put a little alizarin in that over here to get a bit of a purplish color. Sometimes if you don't want to mix alizarin, I can always go back and pull out that pure purple that's actually here, ultra purple, ultraviolet it's called. And with that paper being wet up there, I'm going to be able to get a nice soft sky that hopefully I'll be able to indicate some clouds are up here. You see the water is running like crazy, which is not unusual. I can paint behind some of these trees because I'm going to put some green over them, and I want them to look like you can see the sky through some sky holes that I leave in that. Let me get right here and see if I can keep this from running too far down on top of the roof. Something like that. This is going to be some nice little trees in there. Okay. Change of color. Don't try to put the same color on everywhere. Try to change it up if you can. A good design principle, of course, is to change your colors about every 2 inches or so. If you can do that, you can end up with some very nice looking skies or buildings, whatever. I've got to be careful here. If I stop talking for a little bit, it's because I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm doing, and I don't want to mess this up in here. Put some sky above this building up here. That's pretty good. Okay, so got some purple there. I want to wash that out. Okay, so put a little dark over here. The corners, it's always nice if you can make the corners a little bit darker than the interior. It helps the eye stay in the center of the painting as much as possible, which we want to do. A little running there. Okay, let me try my little half-inch brush here, see if I can fill in this area back here. This is really going to be dark back here, so I don't care really how dark I get it. I'm going to mix in just a little bit of this dark neutral tint, which is a let's see what that looks like back there. Okay, I'm going to darken this down even more. It's really dark back here. That neutral tint helps put a nice dark color on it, and it still lets me outline my buildings. Okay, and then I've got some more dark that's going to be over here on the left side to to echo that a little bit, we want to put in some in here that's going to be just a little darker. I want this to be darker because I want it to really highlight the buildings behind it. As long as that paper is still wet, you can see that it blends nicely and it doesn't leave a lot of marks that are hard edges. Most of this area of the trees and stuff that's in the distance, you want to have soft edges on it. So I'll leave it like that. I'm getting a little running here, as you can maybe see. A good way to take care of that is to use a paper towel and just sort of blot it out. Go around along with your sketch and see if you can sort of blot some of that out so it doesn't run too much. Okay, that's pretty much what I wanted to do for the sky. Let me see, I think maybe I'll take another slight dip here because I've darkened it up in some spots here, like maybe up here. I do have some hard edges there that I don't like. So I'm going to see if I can soften hard edges. You can always make a hard edge soft. Hard edge soft by using just clear water. If you get your brush good and clean, you can always go up here with some water in your brush and just tickle the edge and it will turn soft. You don't want to mess around in these skies too much because it's easier to ruin a sky than it is to sort of fix it up. At least that's been my experience. You get water here that's too heavy and then you start getting hard edges, and you don't want hard edges in most of the sky. So let's leave that for now and see if we can go on to something else. The colors that I'm going to have in a lot of the rest of this painting are, I'm going to put in a small coating of this raw sienna, which is a very pretty underpainting color. I just noticed I got my brush in my clean water by accident. That happens from time to time, but we'll get some water in here. I'm going to just start putting in some basic color down here. It's going to be sort of an underlaying color for the foreground of the painting. We're going to need this to be toned down. It can't be so white. I'm using a 1-inch flat brush for most of this. In case you didn't notice, so a lot of this is going to be just nicely sort of a little ochre. It's going to give a nice tone to the paint, to the watercolor paper, and hopefully here, let's see, put some back in here as well. All of this needs to have some tone on it. I'm just kind of getting rid of some of the white paper right now. Want to save your whites for the last. If you've been painting watercolor with me at all, you know that you try to save the white of the paper until the last possible minute. All watercolorists tend to do that. And so I've got some nice color on there right now. I'm going to leave that alone for a few minutes and see if see what it looks like. The sky is still pretty wet, so I don't want to go back close to that sky. I'm going to mix myself up some nice green colors here. I need some greens for the trees. This area here is going to have some different colors of greens. I have about 2 or 3 little palm trees that stick up here. They're hard to see. I want to put those in, and I want to put in some darker trees over here, but they have a nice sun coming from the left. And so the tops of these trees on the left are going to be brighter. They're going to be more yellow than the right side, or the bottom side, which is going to be either darker green or blue. So as we start that, I'm going to get my 1/2-inch brush. I'm going to start pulling out some greens here. I'm going to throw in some sap green on the palette. just pure sap green. Going to throw in a little bit of this Cupric green, which is a very dark staining color. I'm going to put some of that on the palette, get myself a pile of that out here. While this is drying, I'm going to throw in some yellows. The yellows and blues always make some beautiful greens, as you probably know. So I'm going to throw in some lemon yellow down here, try to get a pile of it going. So much of this is to have these watercolor washes available, have this paint handy, because in watercolor you sometimes have to work very fast. You don't have time to stand back and debate your colors and think about them for a long time. You have to sort of react to the paper, react to the water, and I want to be prepared to do that. So I'm going to make myself another little pile of the cad yellow here, which is going to make a nice green. Actually, if I mix this cad yellow with that this color that's on here, this neutral tint, all of a sudden I start getting a little olive green. You might be able to see that in the palette coming up, getting some olive green here. You can make all kinds of colors of green with the blues you have on the palette, the yellows you have on the palette, you have some greens on the palette, and the combinations of those along with this neutral tint make a very nice set of greens that you can use for trees and bushes and shrubs, etc. And as I paint, I will probably be going back into these colors and pulling out whatever color I feel like I need to make the tree or the bush or whatever look the way I want it to look. So I'm going to start up here now and put in some trees. These trees are a little farther back. They could use a little blue in them actually, and I'm going to use this neutral tint to pick up some bluish color out there. And I'm just kind of scrubbing in some things that look like trees in the distance there. I'm not painting trees, I'm painting a shape. And the shape itself at the edges tell you what that is. When you look at that from a distance, you'll say, oh, that must be a tree. That's the only thing that has these type of edges on it. So what appears at the edge of a shape tells the viewer what the shape is. So you have to think about that as you're putting these colors on, that what is at the edge is going to tell the viewer what they're looking at. And you want to make sure in watercolor that you have the paints dark enough, because if it looks the right color on the paper, it's probably going to be too light. Most watercolor painters, in my experience in the workshops I've taken, every time I talk to an instructor, his typical comment is, you're too light, it's got to be darker, So try to put in colors that are darker than you really think you need right now. But when they dry around 20 to 30% lighter. So when that happens, then you see what the color really is going to be. So I'm putting in some dark under shading here under this tree. Light's coming from the left. I have a nice soft color here on the top, yellow or greenish yellow. I'm throwing in some other greens and yellows in here to sort of mix it up so I don't have everything look the same. Every 2 inches or so I want to change the color, go back to some darks, bring it in. So from a distance, hopefully this painting starts looking like it's really got some trees back there in the background. Leave a couple air holes here, air pockets for the sky to show through. Most trees have some sort of a holes you can see through. I'm going to paint this carefully, hopefully down this way to make it nice and dark. So I've got these colors that are on my palette. I'm going to go back and recolor this because it didn't end up dark enough for me.